the Dolphins meet the Bengals. Dan Marino returns from last year's injured Achilles to again lead his team to the top of the AFC. With the help of wide receiver Irving Fryer, a Super Bowl may be in their future. But tonight's historic matchup pits father against son for the first time in major professional sports. The NFL is next on TNT. Tonight from Riverfront Stadium in Cincinnati, it's the Miami Dolphins and the Cincinnati Bengals. It's the first father-son head coaching matchup in U.S. sports history. Don Shula against David Shula. Father versus son. The Shula Bowl, if you will, here from Cincinnati. Hi again, everybody. I'm Gary Bender. We have a family reunion tonight, the Shula family reunion. We have Father Don, 64 years old, the all-time winningest coach in the history of the NFL, going against his son Dave, who at 35 is still the youngest coach in the NFL. And Pat Haden, as we do our homework for this ball game, this figures to be that kind of a game where father is going to give son a very painful lesson.
Well, Gary, you may well be right. You know, it's very difficult, I think, for a son to join the family business. And for the Shulas, the NFL is the family business now. It is a game of high emotion. We've seen that, and Don Shula cares about all 5 of his kids. But once this game starts, all these coaches care about, both of them, is winning. The other thing to remember, 1963, Don Shula was the head coach of the Baltimore Colts, his first year. His quarterback, Johnny Unitas. Tonight, his quarterback, Dan Marino. 2 pretty good guys, by the way. And after all the emotion, I don't think a coach is going to decide it. I think Dan Marino will.
Well, the Miami Dolphins are making plans to host Super Bowl 29 in Joe Robbie Stadium. They come in here the top-ranked offense in the NFL, and a quarterback in Dan Marino, who figures to have all the passing records when he retires.
I think you're right, Gary. You know, Dan Marino, some people this summer were saying, you know, maybe he wouldn't be able to play back to after his injury and play as well as he has in year past, but he's off to a terrific start again this season. You see, first in touchdowns with 12. You see, he's had 2 400-yard games. Most importantly, his team is 3-1, and this is a very dynamic Miami Dolphin team. And Gary, Dan Marino was saying to us yesterday, you know, Cincinnati plays a lot more man-for-man defense than most teams in the NFL. I want to use those wide receivers, and then when they go zone, there's some big holes for their tight end Keith Jackson and their fullback Keith Byers.
Cincinnati comes in here 0-4 for the year, third time in 4 seasons, 1 of 3 winless teams at the start of the day. But what they're hoping, Pat, is that David Klingler can be their quarterback of the future.
Yeah, and that can't be 2 or 3 years from now. It really has to start tonight. David Klingler has to get the job done tonight. And you see what happened last week against Houston. Really was an awful performance by the entire offensive team, including David. You see the 3 interceptions. He was sacked 7 times, didn't get much protection. But what he didn't do well against Houston, Gary, was handle the blitz. And I promise you, the Miami Dolphins will come after him again tonight. And if he doesn't handle the blitz any better, they're not going to win.
The Miami Dolphins have battled injuries all year long, as evidenced by the fact the first 4 games they started 4 different guys at left cornerback. But their biggest loss may be running back Terry Kirby, who they lost for the season.
Yeah, it is. You know, with Terry Kirby, this is a diverse team. It's one of the best offenses around. But without him, they're going to have 2 guys replace the skills that he brings to this team. As the runner, they'll use Mark Higgs. He'll get the start tonight. He's been their leading rusher the last 3 years. And then in passing situations, Bernie Parmalee will come in. So those 2 guys, hope, will fill the role for Terry Kirby.
The top pick in the draft, Big Daddy, Dan Wilkinson, a 313-pound defensive tackle from Ohio State. This is his first national TV appearance as an NFL player. They're hoping someday he'll be a dominant player.
You know, it's amazing for some people to suggest, as they have, that their #1 draft pick was a waste because he only has 9 tackles. Really is silly. It's way too early. This guy can be a very good defensive tackle, but it's very difficult to have a dominant player inside early in your career. It's much easier to be a defensive end and rush the passer. But he does have to play better, and tonight he's playing against Keith Sims. That'll be a matchup that we're going to watch. We'll have a large part in the outcome of this game.
Dave Shula, in his 3rd year, he's 8-28, trying to prove he can turn the Bengals around. And he said, I'm looking forward not only to matching up against my father tonight, but against the greatest coach in the history of the NFL. They had a team meeting this week, trying to light a fire under the team, and there's Daddy. Don Shula, 25th year with Miami, 330 wins, 6 Super Bowls. That's more than any coach in NFL history. and the only coach to have an undefeated season, that being in 1972 when they went 17-0. He's 9-1 career-wise against Cincinnati. David versus Goliath? Maybe.